There's like no audio. Bro, that's so weird. What in the world? All the audio just got like nuked. I don't know what the heck happened. All the audio got nuked. But we're back. Okay. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Now I'm gonna be back again with yet another stream. Yeah, so we got the TTS up and running. I did want to have a little portion of the stream dedicated for you guys to ask me some questions. And it could be about random things because I've noticed that you know, sometimes you guys ask the most interesting questions or lead to like the most interesting rants. And so I did want to have like a little portion open for the stream for you guys to be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? You know, I've been trying to follow closely what's been happening in like Israel and Palestine with the war between Israel and Hamas. So you guys can ask me questions about that. But you can ask me questions about whatever. Ask me questions about voting. Yeah, or gaming or whatever. But oh, let's see. We have Alexis Andermack in the chat here once again.
Andermack said in the chat, Apple Star, it was a fake mustache. Maybe you've been mistaken. Apple Star, it really looks a fake mustache.
Apple Star, a fake mustache? What? This thing right here? Do you think this is fake? Man, no, I'm sorry. But you know what is fake? This is fake because there's no alcohol in it. So this is fake, yes. But my mustache, no, it is not fake. But yo, look, Alexis Andermack. One thing I want you to do is translate your comments into English because half the time I don't understand what you're saying at all. Like it gets very confusing as a streamer trying to interact with you and then understand what you're saying.
Worship the Aleister Crowley.
Who is Aleister Crowley? Hold on, I am going to look up who this Aleister Crowley person is. Aleister Crowley? Are you saying Aleister Crowley? Aleister Crowley. Who are you? Official Mike?
Alexis Andermack.
Aleister Crowley is an occultist.
Maybe I am a phony.
I'm not going to look up some sort of occultist. Bro, like why are you having me search up Aleister Crowley? But you know what's interesting though? You know, I do actually have a little thing to say about this. Which is, you know, Aleister Crowley clearly went down the wrong path. He decided to become an occultist and then do like ceremonial magic and stuff. So yeah, clearly went down the wrong path. But you know what's interesting? He also was raised as a fundamentalist Christian. Bro, the fundamentalist Christianity is no good. No good. Yeah. Alexis Andermack said, "In me lives he." No, I don't believe it. Look, official Mike, I know you're in there. You can come out now. I'm not talking about like out of the closet. You can stay in there for a little bit, but like I mean, like you can like we know it's you. Bro, there is no one else in my audience who would tell me to look at some occultist other than official Mike, who literally all of its comments are just shock value, which is actually kind of hilarious. But actually, you know what? To kind of kick off this stream, I did kind of want to quickly discuss how there were I did want to talk about how there were claims by the mainstream media that Israel had bombed a hospital. That claim is appearing to be false. Now, most of this evidence has come from footage that the IDF has released. So, I mean, it's not necessarily corroborated as far as I know, other than like the footage, because anyone can say, oh, the IDF is lying, the IDF is doctoring the footage. But at the end of the day, the IDF has released some evidence that they did not bomb I forget what the name of the hospital is, but they did not bomb the hospital where, according to Hamas, somewhere between 300 to 500 civilians died. So, according to the IDF, that was a misfire from the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, I will admit on my personal Instagram, I went and made a story saying, it's just as important to pray for the Palestinians as it is to pray for the Jews. And I did post, some post by Impact on Instagram talking about the situation. And, I'm not going to roll that back. I'm not going to repeal that. And the reason why is that, even if Israel didn't bomb the hospital, it still sucks that those Palestinians died. And especially as someone who is pro-life, I really don't want people to die, especially in war, in a conflict in which they had no choosing necessarily. It's not like they wanted to be used as human shields. So, look, if what's sad about the war is, Jews dying in Israel, just civilians living about doing their own thing, the case can most certainly be made in the other direction with the Palestinians, right? I have no qualms with Palestinians writ large. Now, if you support Hamas, I do kind of have an issue with that. But again, like I pointed out in my last stream, if we're being pessimistic, 45% of Palestinians do not support Hamas. Do not support Hamas. So that means that there is a very big chunk of Palestinians who do not support Hamas. So my qualms are not with Palestinians. My qualms are with Hamas. I'm going to be as upset when I see Palestinian deaths as when I see Jewish deaths. And that's just the way the news goes, as Rick Sanchez would say. Let's see. Does anybody in chat have any questions or anything? Because if nobody in chat has questions, actually, you know what? There's one thing I'm going to react to, actually. There is one thing I'm actually going to react to. Because, look, believe it or not, this is actually extremely relevant to me. Yes, last week, Tonight actually did an episode. Oh, yes, John Oliver actually did an episode about my upbringing. Homeschooling. Now, let's see. Hopefully I don't get, stricken for this. Not, by disease, but, stricken as far as, copy stricken. But I want to react to this just to see if he lies blatantly about this or if he, is being honest about homeschooling and what it's like. Because, look, I was homeschooled as a kid for the vast majority of my pre-college days. And, I was homeschooled a very specific way, but there are many other people who were homeschooled in very different ways. And I kind of wonder how he's trying to paint homeschooling. It's a massive cultural force that's kind of been catapulted by, at-home learning in the era of COVID. So I kind of want to see what this dude has to say about the situation. Especially because I don't know if he's been homeschooled, but I certainly have. And so as someone who has been homeschooled firsthand, I can probably easily spot, at least to some degree, I would hope, some misconceptions that he might be construing here.
Our main story tonight concerns school. For some, it's the place to make lifelong friends and enjoy first crushes, while for others, and I'm not naming names, it's not.
So, he is outing himself as having not been homeschooled.
Different. Specifically, we're going to talk about homeschooling. During the pandemic, many parents were suddenly forced to do it, and while some struggled, others, like this family, absolutely thrived.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now you know your ABCs.
That is clearly excellent, but it is also a pretty mean way to make other parents look like total shit. Because that is significantly better than anything I did with my kids during the pandemic. It was much less singing certified alphabet bangers and much more hiding in the closets praying they would not find me. Also, quick shout out to the baby on the counter living her best life.
Also, can we give a shout out to the writers for breaking the writer's strike so that I can have this content to react to? Let's give it up to them.
She has no idea what's going on, but yet there she is in the centre of it all, like Mariah Carey on a New Year's broadcast. now that family...
It kind of fits, though. She's in, the lighter, attire, like it fits.
Like many, eventually sent their kids back to school. But for some, homeschooling isn't just a pandemic-era necessity, it's a way of life. And you may have heard a stereotype of homeschoolers being Christian conservatives who object to what kids learn in public school environments. And I admit, those people do exist. Take this man who offers this pretty shaky rationalization.
But it sounds like what his point is going to be is that that's not everyone. Because I kind of know how he sets things up in general, where it's like, you might think this, but actually this. So kind of interested to see where he goes here.
For pulling his kid out of school.
I think the type of content...
Bro, I saw this video. Yo, I should react to this video on stream sometime, but it was laughably bad. It was awful.
On what they're teaching about sex or anal sex, that my third grade daughter should not be in a classroom where a teacher or someone else is teaching her about that.
You know what's funny? Is that like I remember watching this video and like they kind of painted this dude out to be a kook, but that particular view is actually not bad at all and not controversial, not crazy. Like, isn't this literally what people were trying to rake like Nick Merckx over the coals over? Like, oh, stop trying to teach my children about sex because they're children. I, their parent, will do that instead. And then everyone like called him a homophobe. Like, bro. Yo, I think stop going mask off. We liked it better before.
That was your experience in school?
I through friends in other spots that had been kids at those ages, because mine was only in first grade when we pulled them.
Well, that sounds like total bullshit. Although I guess I do basically agree with him there. Things that are definitely not happening should continue not to happen. But the truth is, the homeschooling community is much broader.
But also, like, and here's like some of the deception. I didn't know that we would be like getting into the deception this early. But like, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, right? So certainly fact check me. Don't just take my word for it. But I'm pretty sure that that does happen in some instances, right? It does happen in some instances. So he's acting like this is all like made up. This is definitely not happening. And that's one of like the fights over this whole cultural issue, right? About whether or not you should be sexualizing your kids. It's like, oh, well, it's not happening, right? So you can't fight against something that's not happening.
Broader than just right-wing parents afraid of hypothetical third-grade lube demonstrations. By one estimate, there are now around 2 million children being homeschooled in this country, and parents can choose that for all sorts of reasons. Maybe their kids have social or health problems or disabilities that aren't...
Hold on. Wait a second. If you're homeschooling because your child has social problems, I don't know what to tell you, Chief, but that ain't gonna make it better. You know? It's like, oh, my child doesn't know how to make friends. You know what I'm gonna do? I'll homeschool him. Maybe that'll make everything better. Maybe that'll make him that'll teach him how to make friends.
Being accommodated. Maybe they're families with legitimate fears about school safety or who are in the military and move around a lot. And there's also a growing number of black parents opting to homeschool due to whitewashed curriculums and zero-tolerance policies in schools that disproportionately criminalise their kids at an early age. So...
Wait, what? I don't think I've ever heard someone homeschooling their kids because their school wasn't woke enough. That would be interesting. I hope you share some of those stories.
There are lots of reasons to do it. And the fact is, for some kids, getting to be homeschooled can be genuinely transformative.
At 15, Victoria asked her mom, Bernita, to take her out of Detroit schools. She says she was being bullied relentlessly for her appearance, and it didn't seem like her administrators cared.
It made me not want to ask questions, you know, or not want to ask specific questions because I'm like, oh, am I like, they're going to call me dumb.
When you transition to home...
Wait. Now, maybe I'm going to be like prejudging here, but did she not learn how to stand up to bullies? I feel like that's like one of the most important things in school is to learn how to stand up to bullies. Now I know it's a whole thing where it's like, oh no, you know, get the teacher to stand up for the bully for you. You shouldn't be strong and independent and stand up for yourself. No, because we want you to be a Democrat. But like, I don't understand how like putting you in like homeschool is like better because in the future, like, bro, I'm not trying to be mean, but someone is going to make fun of her appearance in the future. So it would be good to learn how to face that adversity head on and just like keep it pushing. Right? Like, look, if I had a kid and they were like, oh, I'm getting bullied at school. Like, I wouldn't be like, hey, why don't we take you out of school so you'll never be bullied again? I'd be like, hey, tomorrow after school, I'm going to take you to go buy some boxing gloves.
Homeschooling, how did you start to feel about yourself?
I felt more confident. It was just like kind of like a sunshine, like the clouds opening a little bit.
That's great. That is very nice. And I know that's not something you usually hear me say after a clip on this show. It's usually a variation of that's horrible, that's heartbreaking, or shut the fuck up, you baby bitch lawn dance. So, this.
That's what I'm here for.
This is a welcome change of pace. The point is, the ceiling of how good homeschooling can be is admittedly very high. Mm-hmm. But the floor of how bad it can get is basically non-existent.
This is also true.
Because to an extent...
Now, I will say this. I am in no way advocating for limiting or restricting homeschoolers' rights because I am a massive, massive fan of parents' rights. But I do also want to put out there that this is a very good point. They're like very, very awful homeschool parents who like teach their children barely anything or teach them blatant misinformation. So don't get me wrong. I don't think homeschooling is perfect. But I do want to kind of like react to this video just giving a defense of it.
That you may not realise, in many parts of the country, homeschooling is essentially unregulated, which can result in enormous damage. So given that, tonight, let's...
No. I hope people don't watch this video and then they're like, we need to regulate homeschooling more. Like, that would be awful. But actually, it feels not entirely unrealistic for that outcome to happen.
Take a look at homeschooling. And let's start with the fact there is a lot that we don't know about homeschooled kids, from exactly how many there are to what they are learning. When I said there are around 2 million of them, the reason that's an estimate is that, depending on the state, homeschool families might not have to report what they are doing at all. In these 26 states...
I think he made the you're supposed to be scared about that face.
Parents simply have to file a notice once a year with officials to let them know that they are homeschooling their child. In these 13, they only have to file a notice once with no requirement to check in ever again. And in the remaining 11, they don't have to notify anyone at all. And when it comes to the education itself...
That is good, by the way. I don't think that you should get permission from the state to raise your own kids. Like, how insane is that? How insane is it that you have to beg from the government in many states to get permission to raise your own kids instead of letting the state take care of that for you? That is insane. Absolutely insane. Things like this is why I have long had the idea to write a book that's a dystopia, but it's literally just America as it exists today. Because there are all types of crazy things like this that exist. All these crazy rules like this that exist. It's crazy.
Filing a notice is typically where supervision stops, as in most states, there is no oversight and no evaluation by anyone of the academic program and of students' progress. And homeschooling advocates will tell you that that is not a concern, and that parents will simply come up with all sorts of innovative ways to teach their kids. Here is one parent enthusiastically explaining how he taught his kids science.
I can't tell you how many times, in my home, in our kitchen table, we've dissected, sheep eye.
Oh, no. The dude from the HSLDA, which is like the massive legal defenders of homeschooling. So hopefully this doesn't bring bad press for the organization as a whole, because they do amazing work.
Tell you how many times, in my home, in our kitchen table, we've dissected, sheep eyeballs or frogs. Kitchens are great labs for this kind of thing.
Where does somebody get a sheep eyeball?
Well, John, you can just Google sheep eyeball for homeschoolers.
I didn't know
lots
that.
of people. Absolutely.
Okay.
That's real? Yo, hold on. Wait. I have been upset a little bit by how this dude's seeming to lilt towards wanting to abolish homeschooling. But just like the fact that I now know that you can go online and get sheep eyeballs for homeschoolers, like as a product category, has made all of that sadness go away. That is amazing. I actually love that. That's awesome.
Okay, first, are kitchens the best lab for this kind of thing? I think probably.
They can be, unless you have cats. Now, if you have cats, I will say no. Probably not. We need a sterile environment. But why not, though? Like, you should be, like, cleaning everything, right? Like, if you clean it, it should be fine. I don't... How does this dude run his kitchen? Now you've got me asking questions about John Oliver.
Labs are the best lab for this kind of thing. I'm just saying, maybe don't go dissecting sheep eyeballs in the same place where you cut olives for salad. Also, do not...
Bro, homie's acting like you can never clean a countertop. What?
Not Google sheep eyeballs, despite what that man just said.
Hey, you want to take this little challenge here? Hold on. I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to search this. Sheep eyeballs for homeschooling. Oh! What do you know? Bro, you can get a sheep eyeball. That's actually... Bro, they're like $3? Dude. I didn't know they were so cheap. That's a bargain. That's insane. That's crazy. Okay, that's awesome.
I did it, and I'm not even going to show you the result unblurred because it is too nauseating. Suffice to say, it looks like what would happen if an oyster had a butthole.
Wait, that's actually accurate.
While that man was clearly willing to go to impressive lengths for at-home science lessons, not everyone has the time or the resources to develop a curriculum from...
And also, to be serious, the great thing about what he said there is that it's possible that that's like the best way that his kids can know and be interested in science, right? Like, there are all kinds of instances where it's like, oh man, the way that they teach school in school is just incredibly boring. But parents find ways to, get their kids extremely interested in things that otherwise they'd be extremely bored by. So, I think that the fact that this dude is cutting up eyeballs in his kitchen is not the worst thing in the world.
Scratch. That is why there are big publishers.
Like, bro, why do we compare literacy rates between homeschooled kids and public school kids? Why do we do that, John Oliver?
Who offer materials specifically tailored to homeschoolers. And much of that market is dominated by these three Christian textbook publishers who promise...
Those are all goated. I actually, to be fair, I don't remember Ace. And I think BJU had some weird head covering stuff in their English curriculums, but otherwise goated. Bro, I learned how to write cursive with a Becca. Like, come on.
Promise learning through a biblical filter. And look, it is absolutely a parent's right to educate their child with religion if they so choose. But the...
Let's go!
Quality of some of these books can be troubling. For instance, one...
John Oliver. Can you not say the same thing about the quality of education in public schooling? Right? I do hear that private school is pretty good, but not everyone can afford that.
One current Abeka history book says that the beginning of the 20th century witnessed a cultural breakdown that threatened to destroy the very roots of Western civilization. The cause of this dissolution was an idea or philosophy known as liberalism. Meanwhile, a workbook from ACE celebrates the Confederate General Robert E. Lee as a devoted Christian who practiced his Christianity in all his dealings with others.
Hold on, wait a second, wait.
Meanwhile, a workbook from ACE celebrates the Confederate...
Yeah, we never did ACE. Maybe that's why, because my mom did a very, very, very good job of vetting the books that we got. And that's why stuff, I think it's like BJU Press, I think we stopped consuming that stuff as part of our curriculum just because she was like, oh no, this sucks, this is awful. And actually, if you look at Bob Jones University, if you look at their rules, they literally will make you cry. It is awful. So I do understand being like, yeah, some of the stuff that they teach in these workbooks are awful. I actually think that more homeschooled parents should be writing their own curriculums as alternatives to these people. But nonetheless, other than these values, there is still some good stuff in some of these books.
General Robert E. Lee, as a devoted Christian who practiced his Christianity in all his dealings with others, and a science book from Bob Jones University claims that biblical and scientific evidence tend to support the idea that men and dinosaurs existed at the same time. And if you're wondering what that would look like, ACE actually had a workbook featuring this rendering, implying that not only did men and dinosaurs exist at the same time, but they were totally cool with each other.
I will say, I don't know the science of dinosaurs in history, or dinosaurs and men existing at the same time, except I know that, you know, if we're going based on the Bible, right, that God made all the animals and people around the same time. But I don't know if there's any evidence that the dinosaurs and the people lived near each other. I would think that most people would be scared, if I'm being honest. And we also know that there are parts of the Bible where it talks about like a Leviathan, which is rumored to be some sort of dinosaur, as some fearsome creature that lived in the ocean. So I don't know if they were living in harmony like this. This, I think, is a little bit silly. But it's also a little bit silly to think that many of these dinosaurs, which were likely herbivores, would just be running around eating people. That also is a little bit silly. Like, honestly, I would expect these dinosaurs to be fighting with these people over these reeds that they're chopping up. Like, bro, you're stealing my dinner. What are you doing? Roar! Like, that's what I would be expecting these dinosaurs to be doing in real life.
Hank, great tucked in shirt. Do you see that dinosaur over there? Sure do.
Also, it's a good point. Those clothes.
Bob loved those jeans, by the way. Should we run? No way. These dinos
also, those knives. You know, there's no way that at the beginning of creation, that's what was happening.
Let's just keep whacking these leaves with that one sword knife that you brought. Well, all of that is pretty troubling. The truth is, in many states, the rules and oversight can be so lax, parents don't ultimately have to teach their kids anything at all. Just watch as this...
That can be helpful because, like, my mom doesn't know everything about pre-calculus, right? So it can be helpful in some instances. Also, where's the Matthew C. The Matthew C. representation? Man, that is like some of the most iconic homeschool curriculum, like, on planet Earth. I hope he mentions it because if not, he would be extremely remiss.
Former homeschool student breaks down her daily schedule.
This is my actual list of assignments. We've got the date at the top. I would have been 12. First, we've got classical music, which...
Bro, I think the clothes say it all. Bro. This entire picture. This entire picture should be a warning to all parents who are planning on being strict with their children. The backdrop is a before, and the woman here is the after. That's all I have to say.
Which was just turning on classical music in the morning so that everyone could hear it. We've got Bible listening. We've got handwriting and math. That's fairly normal. We've got memorizing the Bible. We've got memorizing poetry. The poetry was mostly hymns. We've got exercise. That's good. It was usually just walking around the block. And then the whole entire rest of the list is chores and cleaning tasks.
Now, nothing wrong with chores, but that's like 25 for a kid? Like, bruh.
Bro, most of her lessons just involve chores. And just look at that list. That is a lot of cleaning demands. Who was her parent? This guy? I mean, don't get me wrong. He's an absolute zaddy. Would, will, and I'll take seconds. But as hot as he makes doing chores seem, it's not an adequate alternative to education, is it? Although I will say, even that is a preferable alternative to the single worst homeschool curriculum that we found, whose creators excitedly promoted it on a podcast.
Oh, wait, is this unschooling? I've heard of unschooling. Is like, I wonder if he's going to mention either unschooling or classical education, I think. Which I've conceptually heard some good things about classical education, but also heard some really bad things from people who actually were classically educated. And I haven't heard a whole lot from, like, what is it, unschooling, unlearning? I haven't heard a whole lot about that. But I wonder if it's going to be either of those two things coming up next.
We are so deeply invested into making sure that
the name of this podcast. What? Oh no. The name of this podcast is called Achung Amerikaner. For those of you who don't know, Achung is like German for like watch out or warning or attention or something like that. And Amerikaner has a K in it. You know, if they weren't being subtle enough by using Achung, which is a German word, in there. No hate to the German people. Craig, if you're watching, I love you as a friend. I have no animosity towards you. All of the jokes about you being a Nazi just because you like German culture and the German language, it's all a joke. But I think that we know in what tune the dog is whistling here, if you get my drift.
we are so deeply invested into making sure that that child becomes a wonderful Nazi. And by homeschool.
No! No! Now, I must say, at least, I have never met a homeschooled kid who has ever give off any whiff of this sort of nonsense. Yeah, I've never heard anyone give any sort of whiff of this, thankfully. Now, and I've been to entire homeschool conventions with tens of thousands, well, maybe tens of thousands would be an exaggeration, but thousands of kids. None of them seemed like they were Nazis. None of them seemed like they would even listen to a podcast like this. So I do think this is probably the minority, and hopefully this comes across in that way to the audience. But yikes.
Schooling, we're going to get that done.
Well, that is terrifying. You never want to hear a mother lovingly utter the sentence, "My kid's a wonderful Nazi," outside of maybe if they're praising their son's performance as Rolf in The Sound of Music. And even then, just say wonderful Rolf. What's wrong with you? That woman and her husband actually launched their own online community, Dissident Homeschool, in 2021 after she had a, quote, rough time finding Nazi-approved school material for her homeschool children. And you know what? Good!
That makes sense, because you know what? Most homeschool parents aren't Nazis! And therefore, you're not going to find a lot of Nazi-themed homeschool materials. Now, you may find some racist homeschool materials, and there's a plenty of that out there. Well, not plenty, but there is a good amount of it out there. You also might find some that kind of downplays the badness of slavery in America. But none of it's gonna glorify the Nazis. None of them are gonna say that Nazis were good people. And I think that actually should go to the point of, hey, maybe a lot of homeschooled parents aren't actually Nazis.
That probably shouldn't be an easy Google. In fact, if you search for that, it should probably autocorrect to, did you mean how do I take myself to jail? At one point, Distant Homeschool had nearly 2,500 subscribers and included ideas like handwriting exercises consisting of writing out quotes from Adolf Hitler, which I think we can all agree is...
This feels like a joke. This feels like a troll.
Just appalling. Handwriting exercises? That is just cruel. They should be working on their keyboard skills through games like Mavis Beacon Teaches the Final Solution, although not...
No, it should have been Halo. Practicing to be in Halo chat lobbies or Call of Duty voice chats.
Not that. Don't actually do that. That is awful.
Third Reich edition. Yo, whoever does this graphics do an amazing job.
The channel also posted tips ensuring that their parents were in full compliance with the law so that the state wouldn't interfere. But as you have already seen, in most states, they don't have much to worry about there, because when it comes to homeschooling, basically anything goes. So, how the fuck is that the case? Well, in large part, it's thanks to a very powerful homeschooling lobby, whose most prominent player is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, or HSLDA. And here is where I will concede some ground, because it grew out an environment that was, in many places, overly restrictive of homeschooling, with some states and local school districts effectively banning it entirely.
Now, this is an interesting take. I was not expecting John Oliver to say that, yeah, parents should be allowed to homeschool. Like, maybe I'm just, like, expecting, like, too little of the left, but it's not the take I was expecting. So, bravo on you, John Oliver, for taking, I guess this is kind of a basic parents' rights take, but for taking it nonetheless.
In Texas in the early 1980s, homeschooling families were actually prosecuted. But a turning point came after several Texas families filed a class action suit against their school districts and ultimately won. And around that same time, the HSLDA was formed with the aim of expanding the rights of homeschoolers in every state. And from the very beginning, it had a strong evangelical conservative outlook. Its founding president and chairman, Michael Farris, has referred to public schools as a godless monstrosity. And here he is back in
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that, to be honest.
2004, speaking to the Christian Coalition and
Now, the fact that they're monstrosities is not entirely because they're godless. Let's make that clear.
Describing his long-term hopes for the next generation.
Today, it is not preposterous to recognize what's going on, the promotion of homosexuality, the promotion of other kinds of things that you heard from Walter Jones and you've heard many other times, is a deplorable reality that we cannot countenance. I can't wait for the day when our young people vanquish the enemy by a 5-4 vote reversing Roe versus Wade. And
goated. But also, why did they aim it at like the one person who wasn't clapping?
Where we vanquish the specter of same-sex marriage. That's the standard of victory.
What does that mean?
OK, there is a lot that is hard to take in that clip, that's his wish list, that he's already gotten half of it, and that he's saying vanquish the enemy, despite looking less like a warrior and more like your tax accountant's assistant. Over the years, the HSLDA has lobbied extensively from a hard-right perspective on issues that have nothing to do with homeschooling, opposing everything from vaccine mandates to same-sex marriage. But it speaks to how significant a force it is.
Interesting.
That even some parents who are uneasy with its political leanings feel that they have no choice but to be members. Here is one mom who started a homeschooling group to offer an alternative to what she saw as a whitewashed curriculum.
Oh, this is the woke lady.
Talking about her relationship to the HSLDA.
Whenever there's a threat in any particular state to their right to homeschool, oh, you will see us come together. You know, I mean, we're not going to stay together, but we will band up because we all desperately...
Is that Nadia? Is that Nadia, the Call of Duty gamer who was cheating and got discovered for it? And so to clout chase, she, like, got some, like, OnlyFans stars and then decided to poop in her inflatable pool in her backyard?
We're not going to stay together, but we will band up because...
No, that's a joke. I'm not that dense. It's not her. I'm just making a joke.
We all desperately need our right to homeschool. And that's the nuanced aspect of being in the homeschool world. The people that you have to work with in order to maintain what you hold dear are also the people who crush you.
I mean, she has a really good point. Like, as a Christian, I understand this as someone who stands with Muslims for religious rights. And also even as someone who's been homeschooled. Like, we've been in groups of homeschooled people where we're like, man, some of these people are kooky. These people are weird. What? But, you know, we still, you know, we have some common ground and we all support homeschooling and we help each other out with, you know, various things. So, you know, it's no big deal, right? You don't have to agree with everyone on everything in order to come together for a common cause.
It's true. The HSLDA have made themselves so powerful, many parents keep working with them even if they don't agree with everything they stand for.
No, there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
It's a dilemma otherwise known as the Tom Cruise conundrum. On the one hand, $1 billion at the box office. On the other, a billion-year contract to an alien mafia. It's tricky, right? It's tricky.
Hold on, wait a second. He did leave Scientology, and that's when he started aging. Don't get it twisted.
What's a bunch of young honks to do? Plus, for what it's worth, the HSLDA, much like Tom Cruise, will probably never die. As a lobbying group, it's been astonishingly successful, In 4 decades, its efforts have been credited with rolling back existing laws governing homeschooling in state after state. And the argument that it will always make against any regulation is you're just punishing all the parents doing things right to address a handful who are doing it wrong. And in theory, sure. But when you've got some parents running the Homeschool Institute of Dishwashing and others running Lil Nazis Are Us, it seems maybe the reins have gotten a little loose.
What? No. Look, how many homeschool parents are really doing that? Like, let's be honest. Now, I will say, of like this one, the more strict one, probably an uncomfortable amount of homeschool parents do run their households like this. And that's actually why they're homeschooling. But homeschooling is not the problem. They would still be this tyrannical if they weren't homeschooling. So homeschooling is not the problem in that case. And, you know, bro, like, the alt-right's time is already come and past. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Running Lil Nazis Are Us, it seems...
And look, if you want to raise your kid to be a Nazi, or if you want to raise your kid to be a Marxist, like, there should be... It shouldn't be up to the government to tell you what like, political or ideological tenets you can pass down to your children. It shouldn't be. So as much as I, a black person, does not particularly look upon Nazism too fondly, I don't think it's the government to be like, you're teaching your kid the wrong ideology. Don't do that or you will be sent to jail. Do you know why? Because I am a Christian and I strongly support, religious rights. And if you honestly, I'm going to say this is not hyperbole. If you decide to go after the rights of parents to raise their kids as like extreme radicals, either left or the right, people will then come after parents' rights to raise their children to follow in their footsteps when it comes to their religion. And I think it's a very dangerous place to be, because then you're saying, parents can't teach their children their religion? Oh, well, can parents teach other children their religion? Or can parents teach other adults their religion? I understand that this is technically the informal fallacy of the slippery slope fallacy. I completely understand. But I also completely understand that movements do not happen in 2 seconds. Movements do not teleport. They march forward slowly. So I think we need to look at the way things can move accordingly. Right? It's just how things work.
Maybe the reins have gotten a little loose. And the lack of regulation here has serious consequences, and not just regarding quality of education. And fair warning, this is where this story gets quite a bit darker.
More than 2 million children are being homeschooled in the U.S., many of them living in states that have little or no regulations, making it...
Now, I will say, this is the biggest problem with homeschooling. I'm going to be honest. Like, and this is not the majority of homeschooling, by the way. It is a massive amount of like abusive parents, though. But like, and I was wondering how long it would take for him to get to this. But like, yeah, this is a problem.
It's easy for abusive parents to hide behind the system. These are the faces of just some of the homeschooled children who've died as a result of abuse and neglect. Susanna Grubbs was homeschooled in Missouri. She tells us the discipline she received was anything but gentle.
I think that in a lot of ways, me and my siblings totally fell through the cracks. Because, I mean, with my mom's disciplinary techniques and my mom's educational neglect, it's really terrible that it...
And look, again, I'm going to say this. Every time I see an instance of this, I'm going to point this out because none of the parents understand this. If you're thinking about being extremely strict with your children, this woman here is describing an extremely strict childhood. And look at her hair color. And look at her hairstyle. That's all I'm going to say.
It has happened and it keeps happening, and nobody wants to stop it because parental rights are so paramount to anything else in this country.
Exactly. And that is massively dangerous because deregulating homeschooling doesn't just eliminate safeguards against parents who are bad teachers. It also eliminates them against parents who are bad people.
But, like, that's not a homeschooling issue. It's not a homeschooling issue. Now, there are a lot of homeschoolers who do abuse their children. Well, not a lot of. There are a lot of people who abuse their children who are homeschoolers, but there are not a lot of homeschoolers who abuse their children. Right? That's a big, big difference.
For all the HSLDA's talk of parental rights, it's worth remembering Elon Musk is a parent. O.J. Simpson is a parent. Darth Vader is such a parent, he made it part of his fancy name change. The point is,
I mean, they should all have parental rights. Even Darth Vader.
Having a child does not inherently make you virtuous. And one of the key problems here is child welfare laws were written before homeschooling was legal in all 50 states. So they rely heavily on the premise that a child is going to be in school and seen by other adults. As this DA explains.
A lot of child abuse gets...
Now, I will say that I think one of the best environments for homeschooling is if you put your kid in a co-op, which my mom has begun to do, which is awesome. Because if you're going to say that, one issue is abuse, right? And, as John Oliver rightly points out, if your kids are able to be seen by other adults, then they might point out, telltale signs of abuse that they might notice in the child. In homeschooling co-ops, if you're not familiar with what those are, it's basically mini schools run by homeschooled parents. And they usually take place like once a week or twice a week or whatever, at least as far as I know. And, the teachers teach the other kids or whatever, and the kids interact with each other, and therefore they are allowed to have IRL friends. But, if your kid is not like that type of environment, then you're not going to be seen by nearly as many adults. Now, the cool and really, really exciting thing is, and I'm, even though I'm not 1000% a homeschooling stan, I do think there are some really good things about homeschooling. And I'm very excited about the massive growth that's been happening ever since COVID in the amount of co-ops. Co-ops are now extremely more accessible now than they were before. They've been popping up everywhere, and the ones that have already been existing, they're just ballooning in size. They're literally just growing up and then just splitting off in half and then moving on like some sort of microorganism or like a church plant or something, quite literally. And I think that's very, very cool. And that's very, very exciting. So being in a co-op has been a lot more accessible. Now, if John Oliver wants to say, hey, if you want to homeschool your kid, the rule should be that you have to send your kid to a co-op. I do think that there's some issues with that, but I will concede to him that there's some positive points to that as well. Because then you have, the government saying, oh, well, what is a co-op and what isn't a co-op? And then all that stuff, and then they can kind of break things down and be like, oh, if you're teaching your kids these ideological tenets, then you're not an official co-op that's sponsored by the state, and your kids are being illegally schooled or whatever. So there could be some issues with that. But if that's going to be his point, I will say it would solve this issue, actually. And, he does have some points there.
It's reported through our schools. Teachers and school administrators are mandated reporters. So, if a child comes to school with bruises or...
I will say this is also why more local public school sports organizations should allow homeschooled kids to participate in those sports organizations, which in many cases they do not. Now, I am grateful enough to live in an area where I was allowed to do that. I played sports. I played baseball for 12 to 15 years or something. So, it is great that, that I'm allowed to do that where I live, but not everyone can. And if you are putting your kid in an environment where they're interacting with other public school kids and, interacting with their parents too, who are coaches of the team or assistant coaches or whatever, then there's another opportunity to where if your kid's being abused or whatever, then someone else will see and then possibly report it.
Emaciated, that is a very common way that it gets reported.
Right, because the fact is teachers serve multiple functions at school in addition to education. They watch out for signs of abuse, they chaperone school events, and they pretend not to know why Ellie won't sit next to Rachel, Rachel won't sit next to Kelsey, Kelsey's not talking to Ethan, even though Ethan's having a joint birthday party with Kelsey's brother Bryce, who just happens to be Rachel's boyfriend since last period. And they do all of that while also trying to teach long division. Teachers are superheroes who should make $1 million a year. So you can probably...
I will say there are a whole lot of teachers who suck, but if you pay teachers $1 million a year, the quality of education, I think, would actually skyrocket. But the solution is not just to pouring more money into the school systems, because oftentimes administrators and whatever suck up all that money and then the teachers get none of the benefits. That's a conversation for another day, though.
The fact that it is possible to pull a kid out of school with no questions asked or follow-ups allowed could easily be exploited by abusive parents, especially as most states don't even screen homeschool parents for red flags. 48
red flags like what? Like voting for Donald Trump?
8 states have no background check process for parents who choose to homeschool. In fact, even if you have a prior conviction of a crime against a child, you can homeschool them. A study done in Connecticut found that...
I'll concede this to you, John Oliver. Well, I'm a massive fan of parents' rights. I'm also of the belief that when you commit crimes, you do forfeit some of your rights. To a degree, like I'm not the biggest fan of like felons voting, for example. So if you also want to make the point that parents who commit crimes against children or have been convicted of crimes against children should not be allowed to homeschool their children, I would concede that that is a proposal worth strongly considering. I'll give you that.
Of the 380 students withdrawn in 6 districts to be homeschooled, 130...
But I will also say that not every abusive parent is going to have that red flag, right? There was that one white lesbian couple who like adopted 6 black kids, then drove them all over a cliff. I don't know if they had any red flags that would have been caught in a system like this. Did they?
38 lived in families that were the subject of at least one prior report of suspected abuse or neglect. And yet, despite this, at every turn, the HSLDA has vigorously fought efforts to put any guardrails in place. Here is their then president in 2015, explaining why they fight all regulations, even ones explicitly designed to prevent child abuse.
Child abuse is a parental issue, isn't it?
Interviewed by Al Jazeera? What?
Any child, whether they be a non-homeschool child or parent, whether they be a homeschool parent, they can abuse their children. They have the potential to do it. So why should we, for just a few, why should we, for just a few, invade all of the other innocent parents? That's prior restraint. It's unconstitutional. It's un-American.
That's kind of... Wait, Ari Velshi used to work for Al Jazeera? What? Interesting. This guy works for MSNBC now, by the way. I think he has an interesting point here, actually. Something like a red flag policy where, like, if you're a red flag, then you're not allowed to homeschool is a little bit... it's uncomfortably vague. That's a good way to put it, I think.
Are there some categories of regulations around homeschooling that you would support that you don't think of as an invasion or a takeover?
No, not any.
OK, it is bad enough that he's arguing for a total lack of regulation there, but the fact that he...
That's not bad. Homeschooling should not really be regulated, I don't think. Unless you're going to say that, like, preventing people who have committed crimes against children, for preventing them from homeschooling, that's a red flag. That's a regulation. I'll say that. If you want to say that mandating that your kid who has been homeschooled be in a co-op, I would say that also might be a regulation. But regulating what you can and can't teach your kids is very different. But I do think that many measures that are that have good intentions, by the way, to screen out abusive parents or whatever, could also be weaponized to, target people based on political ideology, the same way that the FBI has been.
He openly licks the corners of his mouth before doing so, somehow makes it worse.
No, so, my education has been pretty good, actually, as a homeschool kid, so I understand that this is because you're not drinking enough water. There's no reason why the corners of your lips would be so dry that you have to lick them in order to speak. Nah, I'm being a little sarcastic there.
He looks like a cat went to a Zoltar machine and made a wish to be Andy Griffith. The HSLDA views any oversight whatsoever as an attack, even offering members a 24-hour hotline in case of a visit from the state. In fact, here is the sister of that woman you saw earlier, explaining how they would practice what to do if Child Protective Services showed up on their doorstep.
You know what? I'm not going to say anything. That's private information.
Step.
Parent would lock the front door, would call the Homeschool Legal Defense Association on the phone, hand the phone out the kitchen window, and us kids were supposed to hide in the basement. We actually did drills on this stuff, folks. We did drills in case someone ever decided to check in on our well-being.
Now, here's the interesting thing is, you know, most homeschool parents aren't this paranoid or afraid about, you know, the state coming in and taking away the kids because they were homeschooling or whatever. But if you know, put in more regulations against homeschooling, there are going to be a lot of parents who do this with their children. And I think it's going to instill a lot of fear unnecessarily inside of them. And it's also going to make the kids just be like unnerved. Like, these types of drills are not normal. And I don't know what type of brainwashing you would have to engage in order to get a child to think that that's normal and that's okay and all fun, fine, and dandy. Like, that is scary. It's like, hey guys, in case the state ever tries to take you away from me, hide in the basement. Like, what?
Holy shit, that is dark. Drills are meant for practicing what to do to avoid getting hurt, not to avoid getting help. It's why fire alarms say pull here in case of emergency and not snitches get stitches. And the thing is, because of its...
That's actually, you know the funny thing about that though?
Case of emergency and not snitches get stitches.
You know the funny thing about that though? Is that that's what the sign should say, because it is illegal to pull a fire alarm in the case of a false emergency.
And the thing is, because of its committed membership, the HSLDA has the power to stop any kind of oversight in its tracks. Take Rayleigh's Law, named after an 8-year-old girl in West Virginia whose father pulled her out of school after he was reported for abuse. She died of neglect only a few weeks later. Now, eventually, legislators proposed a law that would prevent parents from withdrawing a child from school when there is a pending child abuse or neglect investigation.
That's reasonable, I think, to a degree. I think that's reasonable. It could be weaponized, but it's reasonable.
Or when a parent has been convicted of domestic violence, child abuse, or neglect. And
that's also extremely reasonable. I like the conviction better than the pending thing, but...
Seems like that law would be easy to get passed, right? But if the legislator who proposed it found out, not so much.
There were groups, I want to say there's like this Homeschool Defense Fund group that came out against Rayleigh's Law.
The HSLDA.
That's it. And there were quotes about how awful this bill was, and it's an attack on homeschooling, and, you know, they want to move the goalposts. That's what you do in politics, but I always thought maybe protecting children, you wouldn't actually go about that.
Right, and that seems pretty reasonable. And if the HSLDA thinks trying to protect kids from being taken out of school by people convicted of child abuse is an attack on homeschooling, they're saying quite a bit about what they believe homeschooling.
Well, hold on, wait a second. Let's run that again, because I think that's I don't like the framing of that.
About that.
Right, and that seems pretty reasonable. And if the HSLDA thinks trying to protect kids from being taken out of school by people convicted of child abuse is an attack on homeschooling...
That's not what they believe. They don't want homeschooling regulated in any way. They don't have any problems with you trying to keep kids from being abused so long as you don't touch homeschooling in any way. That's the problem. That's the problem that the HSLDA has, at least. So I don't like the framing of that. It's like, it should be that they don't want any regulation of homeschooling, even if it could or will prevent child abuse. That would be a more accurate framing of that situation.
They're saying quite a bit about what they believe homeschooling to be. If Chili's responded to a health...
That's just so deceptive. Now he's basically saying the HSLDA thinks that homeschooling is child abuse and should be for child abuse, and they're going to protect child abuse at any cost. That's incredibly deceptive. And what sucks about this is there are like 3.7 million views on this and like 14,000 comments. So we're going to go through some of these, but he is painting homeschooling in an unnecessarily negative light to an audience that knows little about it. And I think that's dangerous. Now, am I going to say that homeschooling is perfect? Oh, heck no. No, there are certainly issues with homeschooling. I should know because I was homeschooled. But at the same time, there's some really great things about homeschooling and multiple advantages of homeschooling over sending your kid to either private or public school. For example, I'm extremely adept at, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm a big fan of programming. I love programming. I program like different things. I have written and developed programs and maintained them over multiple years. Now, I would never have done that. I can tell you this right now. I would never have done all of that if I wasn't homeschooled. Being homeschooled gave me tons of time to read all these random like programming books from the library at like 9 and 10 years old. Okay? And I'm talking like hours, like multiple hours per day reading the books. And then maybe if I end up getting hyper focused, like multiple hours per day or multiple hours on multiple days of the week, like actually writing the code. So you try and tell me that your kid can do that during a normal school year. No, not at all. So like this idea that like homeschooling is so awful or is like designed to protect extremists, I think is a bit ridiculous and is unfortunately grossly deceptive.
Writing their workers up for pissing in the skillet queso with, "This is an attack on everything Chile stands for. Don't punish the majority of our staff for the minority who piss and shit in our Presidente margaritas." You'd have some questions about what Chili's thinks it stands for. And for the record, that man's bill never passed.
What?
And that story's been repeated in state
Hold
after
on.
state after state.
Now that's a shame because I think that bill is actually, sorry, that bill is actually reasonable. So that's a shame that bill never got passed.
That man's bill never passed.
I will say maybe get rid of the pending case and then switch it to convicted, and I'm 1000% on board.
And that story's been repeated in state after state after state. As one legislative aide who has gone up against the HSLDA has said, "I've never seen a lobby more powerful and scary." And a legislator in Arkansas who tangled with them says, "They told me the only legislation they wanted was what Alaska had, which was nothing." At a certain point, it starts to feel like the HSLDA is basically the homeschooling equivalent of the NRA, an extremely powerful organisation that, while it represents...
The HSLDA, I'm sure, is a lot more powerful than the NRA. I would posit you that.
A large number of people pursues an outermost fringe version of their agenda. So where do we go from here? Well, in a perfect world, we'd make sure that homeschool kids were both safe and actually receiving a functional education. And there are smaller organizations.
Ooh, now what does that mean? Tell me, John Oliver, what does it mean to have a functional education? Do you have to know about gender identity? Like, be more specific, if you will.
Organisations like this one pushing for those sort of changes. But at the barest minimum, we could require in all 50 states to register a child as homeschooled so there's at least a record that they exist. That is how low the bar is here, at the Earth's core.
I mean, I don't think that's necessary. I don't think there needs to be my mouth is food in it, but I don't think that there needs to be some sort of registry of these are all the kids who were homeschooled. Bro, imagine if the FBI had access to such a list. But, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Which I'm sure, according to at least one homeschooling textbook, is somewhere between soil and the fiery bowels of hell.
You laugh, but I guarantee that there is one curriculum that says that hell is at the Earth's core.
Beyond that, we could pass some basic child safety protections to ensure parents can't pull their kids out of school to escape scrutiny for abuse. A few years ago, to its credit, Georgia passed a law that requires parents who pull kids out of school for no reason to send documentation within 45 days that they are homeschooling their child or proof of attendance at another school. If they don't do that, they're subject to a follow-up from the state. And even this Republican Georgia state rep acknowledges that it was needed.
Hold on, does that apply to private school as well?
Or proof of send documentation with law that requires parents who pull kids out of school for no reason.
No, any school. Okay. I'm just taking John Oliver's word for it that he's talking about any school. This is about taking kids out of any school. I think it's a problem. Because, like, what if you pull your kid out of, like, private school because it gets too expensive? And it's, like, the middle of the school year. it's too late to put your kid into public school because like the kid's education will be all whacking out of schedule or out of sync or whatever. So if the kid is just like not going to be educated for, that particular amount of time, I think that's fair. Maybe it should be like 6 months or something. You got to give the parent time to kind of like figure out what next steps to do for like education of the kid. But, that's not entirely unreasonable.
To send documentation within 45 days that they are homeschooling their child or proof of attendance at another school. If they don't do that, they're subject to a follow-up from the state. And even this Republican Georgia state rep acknowledges that it was needed.
If the people in your world that you believe are most protective of you are torturing you or abusing you, who's going to look out for you? I mean, I don't like government intervention in a lot of things, but I don't, the government's the only person I know of that can intervene in this kind of case to save a child.
Yeah, he's right. He's just completely right. And agreeing with a staunch Republican Georgia state rep wasn't something I had on my 2023 bingo card. I've almost got a full bingo, by the way. I'm just waiting on you-know-who to you-know-what. And to be clear, I share his...
Now, for the record, I do not know who.
Ambivalence about government intervention here. I understand that involving social services and the government in people's personal situations poses a risk, especially to those who aren't wealthy and who aren't white. It's not like I love the idea of giving the state room to poke around in people's lives or that I think our child protective services system is flawless, no notes. We're almost definitely going to be doing a main story on CPS one day. But it does
it's going to be fun. Yo, let me know in the chat if you guys want to see me react to John Oliver talking about CPS.
Like giving parents a get out of all scrutiny free, no questions asked card just isn't the answer here. Because being a parent doesn't automatically make someone moral. And being with a parent doesn't automatically make a child safe. And the truth is, a few extra security measures would not hurt the many parents who homeschool their children responsibly, but they definitely safeguard against those who use personal liberty as an excuse to neglect or harm their kids. The HSLDA can say all that it wants that it doesn't support Nazis or child abusers, but the fact is, the policies that it relentlessly pushes for allow them to thrive. And basic reforms here just shouldn't be remotely controversial, because after all, this is about child welfare. This isn't rocket science.
Hold on, wait. Why are we going primarily with the angle of let's attack the abusive parents for homeschooling? Actually, now that I think about it, no. I'm going to scratch that. That kind of makes sense, because if you're going to abuse your kids and keep them shut in the house all the time, there isn't really a whole lot that you could do to be like, is something fishy going on here? Other than like actually being like, well, how are you homeschooling your kid?
It's not even home sheep eye dissection. Don't Google it, by the way. I cannot emphasize that enough.
I did. So, boom, breaking the rules. That's a sign that I was homeschooled.
All of this is just basic common sense.
All right, I think I'll choose my plan later, but that was an interesting episode. I don't like how he portrayed homeschooling writ large, because I think that he kind of portrayed it to be like this thing that kooky eccentric parents do, which, while that's true, it's also something that a lot of normal parents do. But I do think that some of his policies that he proposed, or at least seems to support, weren't entirely unreasonable and weren't entirely crazy. I'm actually surprised at the amount of parental rights that he supports for parents. So, this is an interesting mixed bag. It's like deceptive about homeschooling parents, but it's also like supportive of many homeschooled rights. I'm actually not sure how to go from here. But let's read some of these comments here in the comment section. Unirafisor says, there were a lot of ridiculous ways I expected the podcast leader to describe her education, but making a wonderful Nazi was not one of them. Fair. Interesting. Okay, here's a long one from Florin529. I was bullied in my 4th grade private school, so my mom took me out of homeschool. First of all, again, this is the worst reason to homeschool. If anything, the lack of access to bullies is reason to pull your kid out of homeschool and put them in public school, because I do think kids need to learn how to stand up to bullies. But let's read on. Public school was considered devil worship in her eyes. Pretty much it was me doing independent study with her asking me after she came home from her full-time job if I needed help with anything I read. Oh. No, there should be a parent in the home because the kids should be asking the parents for help, not like almost the other way around. Like that's not how it should be working. Each time I asked for help, it was her reading it straight from the book or spending time trying to figure it out. I mean, there's nothing awful about that, but if your parent just came home from work, she's limited time to do that. I would either stay at home all day by myself or sit in her car while she worked. I mean, that's pretty much my entire childhood, except, I also got to play outside. I pretty much BS my way through school being graded on things like morals, Bible study, attitude, and hygiene. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this while I was being homeschooled. I was like, how do they know that like we're not just like lying about our grades? Even though my parents were honest about the grades, I was like, couldn't you just say whatever you wanted until the time came for like PSATs? And they're like, oh, you got to actually, get you to knuckle down on your academics or whatever. The Christian textbooks did not help me at all, especially in college. It's great, but sad that my biggest accomplishment was graduating with AA from community college because my education was so lacking and I thrived in a classroom environment with an actual teacher. Now that's interesting because there are actually a whole lot of people who do not. And I think that's actually one of the strongest cases you can make for homeschooling is that the way that modern schools, and I'm talking not just public schools or private schools, but also colleges, they're not really like structured in a way that helps people learn or helps people get interested in like a subject. It doesn't, especially for kids, it just like doesn't make the most sense. So I'm actually a bit surprised that this person here is saying that they thrived in a classroom environment with an actual teacher in a formal school environment. Now, one could be said that if she was being homeschooled by someone who was actually staying in the house and actually teaching her properly, that, things could have been different. That is a possibility. I'll never homeschool my kids, to my mom's horror. I'm still recovering from the emotional and social aspects of it. Shout out to all the therapists. Yeah, W therapists for the good ones out there. Let's do a couple more comments before we close out the video. John Vanderbeck. Parents using kids as slave labor is a real issue that needs to be examined. Yes, this is true. Even I was aware of, in certain groups that we've been in, I was aware of parents who were actually homeschooling their kids properly, but they were also still kind of doing this. There's also the whole like patriarchy. Like, I'm not joking, right? I've said like, there's no patriarchy holding women down. There is a patriarchy subculture within the Venn diagram of Christians and homeschool parents that does exist, and it is pretty bad. Thankfully the men are spared, but the mentality is basically if you're like a girl and you're in a family, you stay at home and you just like do chores for the dad until someone comes to marry you and then take you off like to his castle or whatever. Like, I'm not even joking. That mentality does exist among people. Is that prevalent? No, it's not, but it does exist to some degree. So I understand where John Vanderbeck is coming from here. I met so many parents that honestly believe it's their right to use kids as slaves. Well, that's actually probably your problem. You need to move to a better neighborhood. But yeah, there are some parents who do believe that. They're not a lot, but they do exist. And here's one last one. I was homeschooled and so was my best friend and fiance. Ooh! W dude for somehow being homeschooled and having a best friend. I met them through homeschool co-op. Oh yeah, there it is. W. Homeschool co-ops are awesome. I met them through homeschool co-ops from which from my experience is kind of like occasional school where parents teach different classes or they put together cool field trips. That's true from my understanding. None of us are super religious or badly educated, but our parents actually cared enough to teach us. For my family, homeschooling was just the most convenient way to educate me because we were always moving around due to my dad's work. For my fiance, he got pulled out of school because of a bullying situation regarding a sibling. For my best friend, the public school system just sucked where she lived at the time. This is also true. And I try to point this out to pro homeschool people that, rail against public schools because many public schools do suck. Not every public school is the same. You can have a public school where they're teaching all types of woke stuff and a public school where they're not teaching any woke stuff at all. You can have a public school that has great teachers and a public school that has awful teachers. So you can't look at all public schools the same. I really like Wink's analysis here saying that like the public school just sucked where she lived, not the public school system is rotten, awful to the core, and should be burned to the ground and then thrown into the ash heap of history. That is a more reasonable approach. It should definitely be more regulated in all states. I disagree with that take. And I think maybe the co-ops should be mandatory. Hey, that's an idea I came up with organically while watching the video, even though I don't entirely agree. Or at least highly recommended so kids can socialize a bit, but sometimes homeschooling is the better option. Interesting. That's a really, really, really good take. I will say, actually, maybe not mandatory, but you should mandate that a co-op examine curriculum and co-sign it. That would actually be a little bit better. Of course, you still have the issue of, what is improved co-op? What is not an improved co-op from the government, which I feel extremely icky about. But that's, I think, not an awful policy to propose. But anyways, this is a rather interesting video. It has some positive things and some negative things. I do like how one of the top comments was actually in favor of homeschooling. That's actually rather nice. But yeah, not a bad video. If any of you guys have watched this video, I have no idea how many views this video is going to get. But if any of you guys have watched this video and have been homeschooled, I would love to hear your thoughts about this video in the comment section, because I would suspect that the people watching this video are looking for a lot more of a critical view of John Oliver's video than people who watched the original video. So if you guys, are familiar with homeschooling, have been homeschooled, definitely let me know like what your thoughts are in the comments below, because I would like hearing fellow homeschooled kids' response to this video. But this is not the best video ever, but it certainly could have been worse, and I appreciate it for not being awful. There, I think I'll put it like that. All right, now I didn't know that reacting to that video would take so long, because now I'm completely out of time to do anything else in the stream. Except do the shout outs to everybody who was up in the chat, although it's actually not a whole lot of people this time around. It's actually just Alexis Andermack, and who actually is official Mike, by the way, and the Arkenstone. So to Alexis Andermack and the Arkenstone, thank you guys for participating in the chat. It's really cool to see you guys here. This stream, high key, not gonna lie, I had like no plans. I had no plans for what to do on this stream before I decided to go live. I just came across that homeschooling video, and I was like, it'd be kind of interesting to react to. And I didn't even plan to react to this stream until I was like, you know what? This would be really interesting. So if you guys have other ideas for things for me to react to, let me know, because on Wednesdays, I do plan on doing more react type content like what I just did here. And then Mondays is more like talking head stuff, more like political things, more interviews with guests, more, reading questions from chat and stuff like that. So, but anyways, I do have to go. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the stream. I will see you guys probably over the weekend, because I do game with my with the Car 3 crew. Sometimes the Car 3 SMP is still live, hopefully. Yeah, I'll see you guys on Monday if I don't do any unscheduled streams. So peace out, y'all.
Oops, Picasso, you made my heart grow. A lesson I learned from the seed is it starts slow. Trust me, you gon' see the tree if you look close. Don't you know having faith is a substance of things that you don't see? But trust me, you gon' see the fruits of your labor. Trust in the King and my focus on laser. Walking in purpose, I'm blessing on favor. I tried to go fall in love with the paper. Till you show me love that will never waver. No one can give me the food that you cater. Tried to move fast and regretted it later. As long as I focus on you and your truth, I know I see the fruits of my labor. Trust in the King and my focus on laser. Walking in purpose, I'm blessing on favor. I tried to go fall in love with the paper. Till you show me love that will never waver. No one can give me the food that you cater. Tried to move fast and regretted it later. I know